today is January 9th, our first meeting of the year of the Buffalo Niagara Coalition for Open Government. Good crowd for starting the year. We got a couple new faces, but why don't we go around the room, introduce ourselves, perhaps state what town you're from. And I'll start with myself, Paul Wolf. I serve as president from the town of Amherst, and we'll go this way.
I'm Mike Kless. I am from South Buffalo. I'm on the board.
Yeah.
I'm on the board. I've been doing FOIL requests for probably 30 years. I'm a real pain in the government.
Yes, Ed McKee, residing in Amherst, vice president, and happy to be here.
Joseph Kissel, I'm an independent journalist from North Tonawanda.
My name is Mike Higgins. I live in Amherst, and I'm a clinical teaching fellow and staff attorney at the University of Buffalo's Civil Liberties and Government Transparency Clinic.
So I should say, many of us know Jonathan Manis, who was on our board.
Yes.
Jonathan was the head of the Civil Liberties Clinic and left to take a new position in Chicago. Mike is now working there as a staff attorney. I guess there's still going to be a head person that they're recruiting, but so they're growing. And so it's great to have Mike on board as an attorney affiliated with UB, and we'll talk some more about that later.
Welcome.
Larry Vito from Clarence, board member.
Janet Vito from Clarence, treasurer.
Okay.
Robert Thill, I'm the retired elected town clerk of Lancaster, New York. Served in that position for 36 years.
Wow.
And as a lifeguard for 2 years, and a zoning board member for 15 years. I'm a certified municipal town clerk, and I'm a certified records manager. And I happened to pick up a paper the other day, and I saw that he was supervisor of the Hammer, or
Right. West Seneca was a former member of ours.
yeah, that he
mentioned
belonged
our
to this
name.
organization, and I said, hey, good enough for him. Maybe I could stop over and see what it's like. I have a very, very dear spot in my heart for open government and the open meeting law. A very, very good friend in Albany that I worked with for many years, and Bob, what was his name? Bob
Freeman.
Freeman, and he and I were basically some of the persons on the vanguard of the opens meeting law and the freedom of information law. And I met him at a conference of the University Association of Towns very, very early back in the 70s. And I just was enamored by the ability of that man to broach this subject and then become the guru of the state of New York. And I was privy to many of his opinions for many years, and had a good relationship with him. He resigned recently, and we have not had a continuance of our.
They just appointed a new person.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
But
yes,
you fulfilled your share of FOIL requests in your day, I'm sure.
Very much so, and to the delight of everybody in Lancaster. And these records are your records, they're not my records. And they're here for you, and it's my job to get them to you as best I can, as fast as I can, in the best order that I can. And
Other
being
places
records
did the same
manager,
idea.
that turned out to be something that was very unique, because I had everything computerized and searchable. It worked out very well. It was a good match. And but I enjoy retirement, and I retired and became a construction site supervisor at Habitat for Humanity International, and they signed me to Buffalo, and they're not sending me volunteers. I built 32 homes in the city of Buffalo in the last 19 years. A year ago, they got a little nervous with an 82-year-old guy up on the roof with a power nail, laying down shingles, put their hand on my shoulder and said, how about doing public speaking for us? And so I am retired now. Except for a couple of the corporate boards. So,
Welcome.
here to see what you're all about, and maybe I got a couple of it. And maybe you could help me too.
Sure.
Because I still keep a very close eye on the town of Lancaster, even though I'm not elected anymore. I read all their minutes, read all their agendas, and I pick up the phone and make quiet, phone calls.
Sure.
Okay?
Great.
That's who I am and what I do.
All right.
I'm Maria Tizzi, and I'm a town of Tonawanda resident, and I guess I just feel that open government is really an essential confidential and priceless, and it started when I did a few foils, and our child said, well, A, we don't have those records, or it's none of your business.
Yeah.
So that just motivated me more, and so now I've been asked to be a board member, I don't know if I
Yeah,
can swim
yeah,
up
we'll
the ladder
talk about
soon,
that, yeah.
but what do I have to do? So I'm glad to be here.
Good.
Right?
Steve Lyle, town of Lewiston, and I still film most of the board meetings and work sessions. And I have a particular interest in how much the engineer is making, because he's a principal in the company that does all the town's business. And he was just handed $1 million contract because it was professional service, and it was just under $1 million. And the whole thing stinks, and I don't know how to get to the bottom of that.
Okay.
Richard Bertrand, the Vice President in Lapland.
All right. Great, well, welcome everyone. So next item on our agenda is our minutes from our last meeting, which was November 7th. We typically skip December. So these were emailed out to everyone. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to look them over. Certainly will entertain a motion. Motion by Richard, second by Mike. Any questions, additions, or corrections on the minutes? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Then we have our treasurer's report. So Janet?
Okay, nothing has changed since November when Paul gave the report. Ending December 31st, we had 23 members, and we, after all, a whole year, lively year, great year. We have a ending balance of $1,081.78 to start off the new year.
Great. Any questions on the treasurer's report? Someone wanna make a motion to approve that report?
I make a motion.
Motion by Ed, is there a second? Second by Larry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So we have 2-year terms on our board of directors, so half our board comes up this year and the next half the following year. So this year, up for another 2-year term is Mike Kless, Janet Vito, Larry Vito, Sonia, who I think will be on her way, and new board member Maria. So we have 5 people for a 2-year term. And let's see, I think that's all we're gonna do for tonight board-wise. Is there someone who wants to make a motion? I guess to do that in one full slate is probably the easiest way to do it.
Sure.
Motion by Mike to nominate these individuals for a 2-year term. Is there a second to that? Second by Ed. Any questions or discussions regarding these appointments to the boards? Our board is, for the newer folks, there's different ways you can set up an organization. You can have the members of your organization vote the board members in, or you can have a process where the existing board members vote board members in. And we went with the latter, only because I was always concerned about whether some people would, politicians always like to infiltrate and take things over, and you could have a bunch of people for $20 join to become members, completely take over, cause chaos. So we're kind of a perpetual board, where once you're on the board members vote and decide who fills the vacancies. So that's how we do it. And people can be a dues paying member, but not necessarily a board member, but we welcome everyone to come to the meetings and speak and participate. It's pretty rare that we have, votes that, are decided by any close, margin or anything. It's usually by consensus. Let's see who's here. Well, maybe it was just someone walking by. So we got a motion on the table to approve these 5 individuals as board members. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. I believe we have a 10-member board. We can always expand that and add people. We're looking forward to people coming to board meetings for this next year. That takes us to number 5 on our agenda. We've talked about maybe expanding our efforts. Our name is the Buffalo Niagara Coalition for Open Government. When we started this 3 years ago, it was to, kind of join forces with Erie and Niagara County, and there's been plenty of work to keep us busy between the 2 counties. I went out to speak at a conference in Syracuse at a New York State Bar Association conference about open government, the open meetings law, and while I was there, I met a couple reporters that said, geez, we wish we had an organization like yours out here. It would be great to have someone to, go to be a spokesperson when we have issues or concerns. There's really no voice out in Syracuse, Rochester, Albany at the local level. There are groups that, focus on this somewhat at the state level. So that kind of planted the seed in my head that, maybe we should think about expanding our efforts. Typically what we do is we do 3 or 4 reports a year, and we'll look at the meeting agendas or meeting minutes for the 10 largest municipalities in Erie County and Niagara County, or school districts in Erie County, Niagara County. We've done public authorities. But we could easily add into that mix, City of Rochester, City of Syracuse, City of Albany, and maybe the counties associated with them. So we kicked this around a little bit at last month's meeting. There seemed to be support for doing this, for expanding our efforts. But if we're gonna do that, we probably gotta change our name. I mean, it would be, I guess, a little awkward to be the Buffalo Niagara Coalition sticking our nose in Syracuse, Rochester, Albany. I just kicked around 3 possibilities, and there could be others of names that would could fit. So I throw it out there for, do people have any leaning? Well, first of all, do people agree with expanding our efforts? Or some people that weren't at our last meeting, do people think it's a bad idea? And secondly, if you agree, which one of these names or some other name do you like?
I'd like to,
Go ahead.
certainly any one of those names if we pick them, but just by example, for the towns and cities you happen to tick off, maybe the Western New York Coalition. I realize if we want to ultimately be statewide, I guess, certainly we can jump right to that name and have a state, New York.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna do it, I'd rather not.
Yeah.
I guess,
Change it.
I don't think Syracuse or Albany probably falls in the definition of Western New York,
Well,
but.
that's true too, in a way, yeah. The more I think about it, Albany definitely doesn't anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, well, just threw it out there.
Sure, I thought about that
Certainly
at one
like the
point
name.
as a middle step.
Yeah, right, that's all the point I was trying to make, but this is fine.
Robert?
I saw that your bylaws and your documents are online, but I didn't have a chance to read them yet. Is there anything in them that indicates that membership in this organization is limited to people living in Niagara and Erie County?
No, I don't recall it
Okay.
saying that.
Evan?
Sure.
I mean, personally, I like something that's got the word open government in it. I think transparency is gonna confuse people. I think open government. The problem is, we gotta make sure we're far enough away. If we take the bottom one, they don't confuse us with the state agency.
We thought about that, man, I know that could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I know, but you don't wanna be accused of, you're trying to get close enough to their trademark. I think open government versus transparency is a better option. The rest of it, I'm not quite sure how to word it.
Yeah.
I mean, the word,
Although transparent seems to be a word I'm seeing more and more, I don't know.
the word coalition, would sort of alert them that it's not the government.
I think coalition and committee
Yeah.
are different, but people could get confused, I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like transparency and open, New York Coalition for Open, Transparent Government.
I just don't like too many words,
Too
is
many
my only
words.
thing I worry about.
What did you say about New York? There's the state,
Well, there's a group called Reinvent Albany that does kind of open government stuff at a state level, but there's the New York State Committee on Open Government,
this is different if it's
which is,
coalition.
you know, Mr. Freeman's group and whatnot.
I think the open government has more of a mass appeal in the name. I know transparency, everybody throws that around, but it's kind of highfalutin to some people, and open government's kind of like more from the people, if you will.
I should say, somebody did send me an email, and I did think about this at one point, New Yorkers for Open Government, as opposed to coalition or committee,
That's
you know. Maria,
When I saw your, information, there's one thing that, transparent to me means like, you can almost see it, open government, and it seems you can actually see it. So what I thought about was New York People's Coalition for Open Government, which we kind of, I mean, they don't like wordy stuff, but,
I gotta fit it
if you
on.
throw in if you throw in people, then that would distinguish us from what you're trying to get away from.
yeah. Too many words for me, but that's just me.
Well, do we need to have coalition, or do we have New York people for open government?
Don't have to have coalition, it could be New Yorkers for Open Government, it could be,
New York citizens, New York
yeah, it could
voters.
be, yeah, citizens, New York citizens for Open Government.
But what if you're not a citizen?
Well,
Then you wanna do it what?
yeah, that's a good point.
I like coalition in there.
Yeah.
However, I like coalition.
I prefer the coalition for open.
I think the third one was the one we were leaning more towards at our last meeting, but,
So let's do that one, then. okay.
What one's that?
Well, it also preserves the most symmetry with our
also
current
allows you to
title.
go statewide, I guess, in the future, you've already got it covered, but.
Instead of Buffalo Niagara Coalition, it's now New York Coalition. It kind of,
Can you use,
makes sense as an evolution.
can you use the New Yorkers and to distinguish New Yorkers Coalition for Open Government?
Well,
Doesn't it
I
almost
think
sound like
that-
the city?
Yeah.
When you say New Yorker,
Well, if you say-
I think
Well, I
just
think
the
it is
opposite. When I see New York,
New York, I think of the city.
I mean, I know I wouldn't, but a lot of people would think subliminally that, you know, this is something out of New York City. New Yorkers is all-inclusive, it's, you know, just a thought.
But if you did New York coalition, wouldn't that imply that it's just a coalition is regular little people as opposed to?
Well, there's,
As opposed to the, open
I
government,
mean, a coalition can be individuals, groups, organizations,
and that would be all encompassing, so.
right?
well, they're all good names. It's just a case of, if we could keep it short, as short as possible, and be effective, that would be good.
Well,
People remember.
to sort of riff off of Reinvent Albany, I mentioned Transparent New York, which
Right.
is probably the fastest, easiest way of saying it, but
Mhm.
Yes.
But people were saying the word transparent, was they preferred the
Does
word
the,
open.
We
Does
like all-
the words, oversight committee excite anybody?
Oversight committee?
Or
Yeah.
oversight somewhere? If that's what you're really doing, you're looking over other people's shoulders.
Well, maybe that could be in the
to
mission
ensure that they are
statement.
complying with the law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my problem with oversight is, a lot of times people look at oversight as you have authority.
Sounds a little
And
official.
punitive.
You know, like the control board has oversight, they can dictate.
Gotcha.
You know, I would prefer that the committee in Albany had oversight over your municipality.
So Paul, whatever we come up with, is that what we're aiming to use for the 501c3?
Yeah, that's, we were talking about becoming a 501c3, so I was saying, well, before we do that, if we're gonna change our name, now's the time to do it.
Good idea to know what it is.
Alright,
Well, it sounds like we like number 3, I think.
I think number 3, unless people are saying something different.
I have a question.
Sure.
That's a nice name, and is that, we talked about our t-shirts,
Mm-hmm.
and is that going to affect anything on our t-shirts?
Well, we haven't bought them yet, so.
Okay, then we haven't put a name on it.
No, no.
Okay, then we're okay. I prefer the coalition for open government.
Any other thoughts on this?
When I'm reading, from what I see, the 3 here, I
Mhm.
like the New York Coalition for Open Government.
Alright.
I don't know
Yeah, that's what other people say.
Majority all agree.
We all prefer that.
You're picking the right one here.
Someone wanna make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we.
So Larry makes a motion that we change our name to the New York Coalition for Open Government.
Yes.
Is there a second? Maria just got on the board, got her first seconding motion.
Good job.
Any other discussion on this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
We're gonna do that effective with our obtaining the 501(c) status, or are we gonna do it?
I think it's official now,
Okay.
and then we'll do paperwork, although we'll talk about this lawsuit as well, that's as next item on the agenda. I thought, well, should we change our name after we file our legal papers, or does it really matter?
That's part of what I was thinking.
So let's talk about number 6 next, which is,
Question,
yeah,
this is where government will go into executive session, because you're talking about what you're gonna do from a strategy standpoint, we wanna post that,
nah.
okay? Just wanted to bring it up.
Sure. So number 6 is Niagara County financial disclosure forms. We've talked about, we've been dealing with Niagara County for the past 2 years. Niagara County was unique. They passed a local law that said their disclosure forms that their government officials had to fill out, which you only have to do if you're a municipality with a population of 50,000 or more. So Lancaster probably didn't have to do them. So, but their disclosure forms were confidential from the public, that the only one who could see them would be the sheriff, the DA, and their ethics board. No other county, and I searched them in New York State, has a similar law. We made the argument, and Bob Freeman agreed, that you can't do that. You can't have a local law that trumps the state Freedom of Information law. And we said to them, you made a mistake on this law and you should change it. To their credit, they formed a committee, they did change it, but the way they changed it is their ethics boards hold these forms for 5 years. They changed it saying any form filed in 2019 going forward will be subject to FOIL, but the ones we have on file previously will not be disclosed. We filed a FOIL request to test that, saying, look, we want 5 years worth of disclosure forms. They gave us 2019, they denied our request for the others, citing their local law. We appealed that denial, that was denied, so now we have 120 days to sue. And we said all along that, you know what, we think this is a good lawsuit to take on. I think we could win. I think it's very hard for them to argue that we will give you the exact same form for 2019, but you can't have 2018s. It just makes no logical sense. So I have done a lot of research and writing. I've drafted a legal complaint. And my plan was to try to get an attorney to take it on. I've never done this type of lawsuit. I certainly would be willing to do it, but I prefer to have others that maybe have more experience than I. And I think it might be a little awkward being the president of the organization and being the attorney in court. So I was gonna go searching for attorneys, but I said, let me first start with UB. The UB Law School has their Civil Liberties Clinic, and Jonathan Manis and I talked about it a little bit, and he was interested, but he had some projects going on, and those projects are fortunately finished, and Jonathan is finished as well. Jonathan left, but Mike Higgins, who's joining us tonight, has just recently started working there, and Mike and I went and had coffee and had a nice conversation, and he said, hey, look, I'm looking for stuff to do. And I said, well, I got an idea for you. What about this lawsuit? And I sent him our stuff, and he looked it over, and he's on board. The UB Law Clinic is willing to take it on. So students would be assisting with it, which is great for them to expose them to this. I think we got to do a couple things tonight. First, talk about, do we want to take the step forward of suing Niagara County? And secondly, do we want to pass a motion saying that we are willing to retain the UB clinic to represent us? The UB Clinic will not charge us to represent us. As part of these lawsuits, you can ask for attorney fees, so they keep track of their time. And if successful, they can say to the court, Niagara County should pay us for our attorney fees.
Right.
And they keep that money, they have earned it, that's their thing.
Wait a minute, that's my tax dollars.
But there are filing fees that have to be paid, so there's an attorney, I should have asked him if he wanted me to say his name or not, cause he's kind of a guy who likes to keep some of these things, I won't say his name because I'm not sure if he wants me to. But there's a local attorney who told me in the past, he said, look, I really believe in what you're doing, and if you get to the point of filing lawsuits, I'm willing to donate money to help pay for whatever. And so I contacted him, I said, look, looks like we're going forward with this. The filing fees are about $355. Are you willing to donate that? He said, absolutely. He sent me a check. I've given that check to Janet tonight. So the filing fees will be covered. The attorney fees, if we're successful, will go to the UB Clinic for their work. And I say we got nothing to lose at that point. So I guess one step at a time. The first step is, we've talked about filing lawsuits, and I think it's something that we probably need to do every now and then.
Yes.
We'd rather avoid it, but I think sometimes you need to send a message, and Niagara County's a whole nother animal, as we know.
Richly deserving.
So we'll put that on the table first, whether, yes, Mr. Phil.
Just a couple questions.
Sure.
When you were turned down by the records access officer, you obviously appealed it to
Yeah.
the attorney. What was his decision?
Same thing, that we have a local law that says, we can't give it to you, so we're not.
Okay.
Mhm.
Then the avenue is clear, you have to go further and
Right.
appeal that. And you keep saying we. Who is we?
I'm referring to our organization, the
Okay,
Buffalo Niagara
but
Coalition.
That's the organization who you are now, okay?
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah.
And is we something that is a legal entity, or just a
We
mix
are-
of
we
a lot
are-
of people getting together? Okay, so you have legal status.
We are a New York not-for-profit corporation. We're not a federal 501c3, but we are a New York.
Corporation,
Right.
not for profit.
Right.
Okay, because our attorney knocked off a few homeowners groups that said, we are suing you.
Right.
And they went for an Article 78, and we knocked them right out of the box, because
Mhm.
they weren't anything.
Right.
They never had any legal status whatsoever.
Well, you could just sue as an individual as
As you
well.
could, yeah.
Yeah.
But they had a group
Right.
that called themselves something.
Mhm.
And they met, and they made decisions, but they had no bylaws, they had nothing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Are you a?
Oh, sorry, Sonia, you weren't here. Mr. Thiel was the Lancaster town clerk for 36 years and is now
Town-
retired.
town clerk.
Council, okay, I wondered.
Town clerk.
Town clerk.
No,
Clerk,
they're-
okay, town clerk of Lancaster.
Lancaster,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, just
Sure.
an observation.
No, good questions. Yeah.
Because we know how politics is in New
And
York.
just so you know, Sonia, we're being filmed. This will be posted online.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Are you trying to censor her?
That was like a
I'll
kick
still-
under the table.
That's funny.
Has you been, I know the clinic, a friend of mine was a law professor, very high standards. I probably know this answer, but has the law clinic done lawsuits before, like for a nonprofit?
Yes.
Yeah, we sued on behalf of the National Lawyers Guild for records from the sheriff's office related to suicides. They were sort of playing funny business with whether or not people attempting to hang themselves were reportable suicides or not. So we sued on behalf of the National Lawyers Guild. That case, we won that case. We got significant attorney's fees. So we've done that. I was not a member of the clinic at the time that we did that. I'm an attorney with, I have like 8 or 9 years of experience. I've done Article 78s before. My first job out of law school, I worked for Legal Services NYC Bronx. I did an Article 78 against Bronx. Yep, I did an Article 78 against the FDNY. The Fire Department of New York for emergency emergency records related to sending children with behavioral needs to the hospital. So it's like a child with disabilities acted out, they would call the emergency services to send them to the hospital, and then make the hospital clear them before they could come back to school, which we thought was discriminatory. That lawsuit, I drafted that lawsuit, and it had a life of its own after I left there, but eventually it resulted in a new law down there, and a federal monitor, and all sorts of interesting things. So I have a lot of experience. I'm very confident that we can
Well,
prove it. Yeah, well, I'm not promising success, but I do think that there's meritorious claims here. I think that my students will do a good job, and that I will as well.
I think it would be
Sheriff's
wonderful to have an association
Sheriff's
with the,
Erie County Sheriff.
with the, UB Law Clinic, because it's a win-win for both. They're getting experience,
Yeah.
and we're being highlighted by, hey, if, they've gotta be good, because these people are teaching these young students,
Yeah.
students. So that sounds to me like it's good.
Yeah?
I think having students is a real asset, because being a college student, you don't able to do anything that your professor tells you to do. And,
Except for you're this guy.
well, I think you're motivated, and I think you have like those research skills, and, you get to the bottom of the nitty-gritty, which I think is wonderful.
You sure?
We take a very limited number of cases, so we spend a lot of time on the cases that we do select.
Sounds exciting for us, and we're looking forward to it.
Do you have a law professor, municipal, or who oversees the clinic? I get it.
I'm running the clinic right now. We have a director in name, but that's not her specialty. And probably before this lawsuit wraps up, we'll hire another tenure track faculty member. I'm not a tenure track faculty member, but I am a member of the faculty.
Okay. Anything else? Someone wanna make a motion that we take the step of suing Niagara County?
Please.
Motion.
I knew it was gonna be him.
Motion by Mike Kless. Is there a second to that? Second by Richard. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next step would be, someone wanna make a motion to retain the University at Buffalo Law School, what's the correct name I should use, Civil Liberties Clinic, or?
Civil Liberties and Government Transparency Clinic.
Someone wanna make a motion in that regards?
I'd like to make a motion.
Alright, motion by Sonia, is there a second? Second by Mike Kless, to retain the University of Buffalo Civil Liberties and Transparency in Government Clinic to represent us in that lawsuit. So I would, on behalf of the organization, sign a retainer agreement, just like any attorney would ask a client to do. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now, our deadline for filing this lawsuit is like February 21st, February 22nd, so we have a little bit of time, so we'll be filing. What I'd like to do is hold a press conference at the Niagara County Clerk's office, which is where you go to file the papers. So we'll talk about it again at our February meeting, but we will plan to do something like that, just to let everyone know that we've taken this step.
That'll get covered.
It'll be assigned to a judge, in Niagara County, we'll have to see what judge we get. And, this will take a couple months to certainly complete, a decision one way or the other. I don't know if you wanna say anything else on that, Mike, or that pretty much covers it, or?
I think that covers it. I mean, for context, I think our case against the sheriff took 9 or 10 months. So, that had sort of a broader scope. This is kind of a more of a very clear,
Right.
tight legal question, so it could be quicker, but you never
But
know.
you're not talking years, a lot of civil lawsuits take years, these cases are supposed to be a little more fast-tracked, so. And, I'm sure there'll be court dates where we can all go and attend and things of that nature.
How long do you think it would, do you foresee it taking to get a decision?
Several months.
Yeah. Next item, number 7, Erie County IDA. I folks on a couple emails that went out there. At our last meeting, there was an article in the Buffalo News where it came up that there were some companies that were delinquent on their industrial development loans, and they were having a debate as a board as to whether that information should be disclosed to the public or whether it should be kept confidential because they didn't wanna hurt a business. No, but on the other hand, these are public dollars, companies getting loans that are falling behind. So Mark Polenkars, to his credit, county executive who serves on the IDA board, he said, look, I am completely opposed to discussing this in executive session. This is something that should be discussed in public. So they tabled it at that point, and then there was another article saying that they were gonna adopt a policy basically that said it would stay confidential until a company was 90 days behind, and then they would disclose that information. And we sent a letter though stating, just for the record, that we agree with Mr. Polenkars, it should be in public, it shouldn't be in executive session. And they replied, by email as to that the policy hasn't been adopted yet, but that's one of the things they were talking about was kind of a compromise, that it wouldn't be completely secret, but it wouldn't be public until a period of time went by. For the record, we just stated our concern that it should be discussed in public. So at one point, I thought about maybe having us go to their meeting, but they canceled the meeting, and they don't really let you speak at their meetings.
Aren't they responsive to the legislature? Don't they have to respond to the legislature as far as what's secret and what's not a secret? I mean, if it's money that's being spent?
Well, and then they do what a lot of places do, they set up a whole separate not-for-profit board. A lot of ways that people get around this is, and they argue that we're not subject to FOIL because we're not a government entity, we're a non-profit, so a lot of games get played. But we expressed our thoughts, and we may circle back around that later in the year. We always do one of our projects is always a FOIL project, and I thought maybe this year what we'll do is file a FOIL request asking for who's delinquent on their loans from the IDAs. So we'll come back around to this issue in the future, but just wanted to bring everybody up to speed on that. Number 8 on our agenda is every March, Sunshine Week is celebrated across the country where we celebrate open government, free press. This year it's March 15 to March 21st. And we talked at our last meeting about doing an event in March where we said ideally we could have someone from the New York State Committee on Open Government come speak, talk for a half hour about what the open meetings law requires, and then maybe I talk for 15 minutes about how we think the law should be improved, and then open it up to questions. So we were kind of in limbo because they hadn't filled Mr. Freeman's spot. They just filled that a couple days ago. I copied you all. I sent an email to the new person who's been appointed, inviting her, asking her if she's willing to come to Buffalo during that week to participate in this forum. I haven't heard back from her yet, so I'll follow up. I wasn't sure if I had her correct email address either. I kind of just took the same format that I know they use, which is your first name dot last name at dos.gov. So I gave it a shot, but we'll see.
Didn't come back yet.
It didn't bounce back to me. Now I'm sure she's just getting up to speed, having just literally started Monday.
Was she the person that wants to fill in?
No, the person who was second in charge, who was hoping to get the job, didn't get it, and she's still there. Kristen O'Neill, and I got to meet her in Syracuse, and
even if we get a second or third person
Yeah.
in line, that's still somebody.
Sure. So I'll keep you posted about that. The plan would be to invite all local government elected officials to come, learn about what the open meeting law requires and how we would like to see it changed. Because as we know, there's a lot of things the law doesn't mandate that we really think they should.
Do you have, as as a plan B, and I realize it's a little early, but any other possibilities, just in case?
No, I hadn't thought about a plan B.
I mean, there's time, I know,
Right,
but
right.
I just didn't know if you had
Mr.
a.
Higgins had a suggestion.
Yeah, there's a new government agency called the New York State Authorities Budget Office.
No, that's true.
And they have oversight over IDAs and similar entities. So, you know,
They understand the open meetings law and
yeah, I mean, they're more, I think they're probably
financial reporting stuff, but.
more about financial reporting, but they're supposed to train board members of IDAs, and IDAs are sort of a hotspot for hiding things in government, so
They have been.
they're a potential
No,
candidate.
That's a good idea.
Who has the oversight locally?
It's a state agency, it's called the Authorities Budget Office, which is kind of, it doesn't really tell you what they do at all, but they have oversight. It's a newly created government agency that has oversight over IDAs.
Where are these people?
They're in Albany, just like the government.
They released a very critical report of Erie County Water Authority, actually following up on the report that we did. So they have the ability to call people to task for, Water Authority was terrible at responding to FOIL requests and things, and they highlighted that in their report. Since then, the Water Authority's made some great improvements. In fact, we recognized them recently at one of our meetings. But that's a good suggestion. Let's talk about the next agenda item, which is kind of reviewing our goals. Yeah.
Before you, just an observation, it's been 20 years since I have been active, really active in the town clerk's office. Something in the back of my mind tells me that the various boards, the planning board and the zoning board and some other people are required to get education,
Right.
a certain amount of hours of education. I don't know exactly who certifies the agenda for that, but when you have this agenda ready, and you have the people ready, maybe we could inquire of this board bureau.
Right.
We advertise this as 2 credits if you attend.
Sure.
To get some of these people to that, because they're the people that really should know.
Right. No, that's a good idea, and we did do that one year with the Bar Association. Attorneys who came got
Sure.
credits.
Right.
But that's a good point.
Yeah.
The state does,
They still do that?
they passed the law, the developers, I was told, they didn't want that passed, but it was passed several years ago. They're very stringent on it. It's.
Yeah, they're
you have to tie
mandated to
it
do
with that.
training.
Okay.
I
If
think
that
we
could
should
count
find
towards their
something
training,
for us.
great.
Yeah, okay.
So page 6 on your handout is just a kind of a one-page highlight of some things that we accomplished in 2019. It's a lot of good stuff. It's one thing to help advocate for change, it's another, these are actual concrete things that local governments changed as a result of us, a report we released, or contact we had with them. And we certainly want to continue that forward in 2020. But I think, together we made a difference. We got some of these things to happen.
I have a question, over here you have Amherst Town Board member posted her financial disclosure form. Was she the only one, or was that?
She was the only one. I think others have since followed during the campaign. I know some others did. You're not required, state elected officials, their disclosure forms are posted online. It's amazing to me that local government officials are not required to do it, so we've encouraged people to do it. The year before, Jim Shaw in the town of Hamburg posted his disclosure form. In 2019, Mrs. Buckeye did hers, and then during the campaign, I believe some other candidates posted it, so that's something that
And the ones that were running said that they would do it too, if they were elected.
it's one thing to have to file a FOIL to get these, but why aren't they just posted online, Sonia?
I wasn't aware, West Seneca added contact information on their website for their ethics board.
Yeah,
Amherst added,
yeah.
citizens can speak out of ethics. We had asked, we have a local citizen who had an issue at and, saw it as a conflict of interest, he thought it should go, he should send it to the county. County says, we don't have anything to do with it. I don't think they do, it's a local thing, we should have.
Right.
It's like, we are in prehistoric times, we don't even know who's on the ethics board. This is an issue with me.
Yeah,
That is so important, and I see that they're allowing them to speak in Amherst.
yeah, yeah.
Remember when we were the county, they couldn't say who's the head of it? It's a real issue, and you know what, God bless them. I read Gary Dickinson, who's a member here.
Right.
I think because
That's
he
how Mr.
read-
Phil found out about us, he read that article.
I read that article.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I read, he got a good, like a majority of the people, I mean, he's a Republican, this speaks volumes.
Sure.
And I think he's helping our organization when they see open government as well.
And I'm gonna talk about West Seneca under new business as well.
So I wish we would do a greater, looking at the Board of Ethics in
Yeah.
the municipality.
So any comments or discussion on
Paul,
2019?
On the disclosure statements, I always consider them as matters of public record, and if they walked in, I'd never required people, if I could turn around and grab the record and give it to them, I gave it to them.
Right.
I mean, for crying out loud.
Did you charge 25 cents?
No, they're reading it. If
Yeah.
they want a copy, then I would charge them. And,
Or you take a picture of your tablet.
but did I understand you correctly, when you went to Niagara to look at their records, they wouldn't release that?
Well, they will give you 2019, but
Forward.
any before that, you can't have.
Because they claim their local law trumps the other
Right,
one.
right.
That's nonsense.
That's why we hired the guy from UB.
And I said,
That's
look,
like the highway superintendent.
I said, you're gonna
That
lose,
says
we
the
don't wanna
highway
sue you.
law- The highway superintendent paper, I think it was
Yeah.
Danvers,
Yeah.
says that the highway law allows them to have a truck.
Mhm.
And they say, well, no, you can't. And he says, well, highway law trumps the state constitution.
I saw that.
Well, come on.
That's a bridge too far.
I saw
Not
that.
in my card.
Yeah,
Okay.
Janet?
Just on the accomplishments, I just put on mine because I come from Clarence, that we got Clarence to reinstate public speaking on their agenda.
Oh, you're right, that's something we should add. Clarence
No,
had,
they
they had it on their agenda that citizens could speak, but then they removed it from their agenda with the thinking that, well, you can speak at any time. Well, but how do people know that? And it takes a lot of courage to just stand up and speak. You should have a section on your agenda, and they put it back on after we questioned them on
Good
it.
for you.
Are more people attending?
Paul and Lancaster, they never let them speak when I first became counselor.
Right.
Finally, I got them to say, well, maybe after the meeting they could speak to you. Oh, okay, so after the press leaves, they like that.
Right,
Okay, and then a few years later, I was able to worm in with some councilmen and say, hey, how about during the meeting,
Right.
let them speak. And yeah, that was better than before, and then a couple years later, I said, well, what good does that do? You got all these pre-filed resolutions, you all got half of them done. How about 30 minutes before, but just on the pre-filed resolutions? I talked them into it.
Right.
Now they have 30 minutes before, just on pre-filed resolutions. In the middle of the meeting, any subject near and dear to your heart,
Right.
5 minutes, but the board member can raise his hand and say, I suspend the rules, I'm really interested in this, they'll give him 5 more minutes.
Right, right.
And it works out pretty good for them.
One of our issues is the open meeting law does not mandate that people have to speak,
That's right.
you know, and why should, it should, you know?
But they have the right, under
Right.
the rules of order, to grant you. that.
Right,
Now, our planning board, they won't even think about them to speak.
right.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things we'd like to change.
They like those close to the vest.
But there's also, I think in my experience,
money.
sometimes, our town board does let you talk, speak,
Mhm.
but sometimes if you're an important person, you can speak for 20 minutes. But if I'm saying something, especially if it's something that nobody seems to like, okay, that's enough for you.
That's
So,
it.
you know, but I just kept on going because I said, look, he just talked for 20 minutes, And the answer was, well, he's an attorney. I said, well, I'm a little person.
You're representing yourself, right? You're your own person, you're full say.
Anything else on accomplishments? Next page, page 7 and 8. Every year we kind of try to have an outline of goals and projects for the year. This is just my thoughts from I try to keep notes as we're going throughout the year of stuff that comes up that maybe we want to think about or work on. But for internal goals, we want to become a 501c3, and we've talked about that last year, but this year I'm going to stick to it. One of the things I wanted to talk about was expanding our reach. We did that already. We try to have like 4 or 5 goals, projects that we want to work on. So goal number 1 was successfully sue Niagara County. So we got that underway. One thing that came up last year in Niagara County is talk about public speaking at meetings. Niagara County does it. I don't like splitting it up, but I understand a lot of municipalities do. So Niagara County says if it's an item on the agenda, you can speak during the meeting, but if it's a non-agenda item, you gotta wait till the end of the meeting. So for us, they would never put anything on the agenda to talk about open government or their disclosure forms. I would ask them to put things on the agenda, and they told me the chairman decide what goes on the agenda. I said, well, can I speak to the chairman? Well, he would never call me back. So
There's a new one, by the way.
I know. So you'd have to wait to the end of the meeting to speak, which drove me crazy because you had to sit there for 2 hours to speak for your 3 minutes. And then they would literally adjourn the meeting. People are walking out of the room while you get up to speak. It's not documented in the meeting minute. It's like it never happened because the meeting was over when you spoke.
Well, and an additional problem, after 3 hours of listening to this, that, and everything.
It's not the best time to talk
Nobody
to
has
people.
any bandwidth left to process
Now,
some random person's
And now,
concern.
so at least you get to speak, but it's not ideal. Now, on the other hand, you cannot speak to the Buffalo Common Council. They don't let you speak. You can speak at a committee meeting, but not to the full council. You cannot speak to the full Erie County Legislature. You can speak at a committee meeting, but only if they grant you permission, and I've been denied permission. I said, I'm the president of an open government group. I sent an email a week before. I'd like to speak about the appointment to the Erie County Water Authority, and they didn't respond. At the meeting, I said to the chairman, can I speak? No, you're not on the agenda. Well, I asked you a week ago if I could be, no, you're not on the agenda.
And no reason was given to you.
No. So one of the projects I thought we might do this year is what government groups allow you to speak and what don't. As a way to put pressure